Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into two of the absolute most bizarre medical mysteries in all of human history. We're looking at a phenomenon that completely blurs the line between the mind and the body. And we're going to start by exploring a scenario that, frankly, sounds like it was pulled straight out of a sci-fi novel. But I promise you, it's 100% real. Okay, imagine this for a second. What if laughter wasn't just a reaction to a funny joke, but a physical affliction that you simply couldn't stop? You're not laughing because something's funny, right? You are caught in a chain reaction that you literally cannot break. It takes the joy totally out of laughter and turns it into this terrifying sign of severe, uncontrollable strain. So let's set the scene. It's early 1962 in the East African territory of Tanganyika, which we now know as modern-day Tanzania. On January 30th, three girls at a really strict mission-run boarding school in Kashasha just started laughing, and they couldn't stop. By March, this bizarre affliction had spread to 95 of the 159 students, forcing the entire school to close. And the craziest part? When those kids were sent home, they brought the contagion right along with them. By June, this unstoppable laughter had swept across the entire region, shutting down 14 schools and infecting over 1,000 people. Now, you might be thinking, oh, a giggle fit, no big deal. But this wasn't just some harmless chuckling. The behavioral symptoms, like falling into trances, aimless running, and intense weeping, were paired with some truly terrifying physical distress. We're talking fainting spells, bizarre skin rashes, severe respiratory problems, and crippling abdominal pain from laughing for days on end. It was an absolute full-blown crisis. But get this, it wasn't the first time history saw this kind of baffling contagion. Let's rewind a few centuries to July 1518. We're in the city of Strasbourg, in the Holy Roman Empire. A woman known as Frau Trophea steps out into a narrow, cobbled street and simply begins to dance. There's no music playing. She just twists, twirls, and shakes day and night for almost a full week. And just like that laughing epidemic, it spread like wildfire. Within a month, up to 400 citizens were gripped by that exact same uncontrollable urge to dance. Hundreds of people, all caught in this involuntary, violent physical trance, dancing day and night right in the streets of Strasbourg. And the physical toll was just horrifying. These folks definitely weren't partying. They were trapped in these violent spasms, their feet swelled up, blood pooled, and literally bled straight into their shoes. People were collapsing from sheer exhaustion, and many actually suffered fatal strokes and heart attacks. They literally danced until they died. The diagnosis: solving the medical mystery. So we've got an entire city dancing to their deaths, and a whole region of schools practically paralyzed by laughter. For centuries, these events completely baffled everyone who witnessed them. I mean, how exactly do you diagnose a contagion that forces the human body to act this way without a single virus or bacteria? Initially, authorities were totally clueless. Back in 1518, they blamed everything from demonic possession to witchcraft or even a curse from St. Vitus. The top medical minds of the time blamed something they called hot blood, and they actually built a stage and hired musicians to make the victims dance more, thinking they just needed to sweat it out. Obviously, that made things so much worse. Later on, folks assumed it had to be toxic environmental exposures or poisoned food. But spoiler alert, every single one of those theories was wrong. Modern science finally gives us the real culprit: mass psychogenic illness, or MPI. MPI explains exactly how a cohesive group can spread these kinds of symptoms so rapidly. It's a nervous system disturbance, basically an intense psychological and social phenomenon that creates very real physical symptoms, all without any underlying organic pathogen. No virus, no poison, just the incredible, almost scary power of the human mind reacting to its environment. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. These victims were not faking it. They weren't just imagining things, and they certainly weren't just crazy. Their nervous systems were genuinely producing these severe physical ailments. The pain, the rashes, the sheer exhaustion, it was 100% real to their bodies, even if the trigger itself was psychological. The mechanics: Simon Wesley's two syndromes. So, to really wrap our heads around how this happens, we have to look at the groundbreaking work of psychiatrist Simon Wesley, who split this phenomenon into two distinct categories. First, you have mass anxiety hysteria, which is a sudden fight or flight reaction. Think of a group suddenly smelling something awful and everyone immediately feels dizzy or nauseous, right? It's really fast and short-lived. But then you have mass motor hysteria, which is totally different. It's slow building. It's caused by deep, repressed stress, and it results in severe physical manifestations, things like trances, twitching, or, you guessed it, uncontrollable laughter. And it can last for months. This perfectly describes both of our historical outbreaks. The pressure cooker. Chronic environmental stress. The thing is, mass motor hysteria doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. You don't just wake up one Tuesday and catch a laughing fit on your way to get coffee. It requires a very specific, high-stress environment to incubate. A chronic pressure cooker of stress has to build up over time. Then you get an index case, like Frau Trophia stepping out into the street. From there, it spreads through visual contagion. Literally, just seeing someone else experiencing the symptoms triggers the exact same neurological response in other stressed-out people, leading to a widespread epidemic. Let's look at the pressure cookers for our two events. Back in 1518, the citizens of Strasbourg were enduring unimaginable hardship. They'd suffered through 3 consecutive years of brutal famine and crop failures. They were battling lethal outbreaks of smallpox and a terrible new strain of syphilis. They were economically destitute and living under this deep, terrifying religious fear of saints who they firmly believed could curse them. They were basically existing in a permanent state of absolute existential dread. As medical historian John Waller notes, this misery and deep-seated fear manifested into a trance-like state. The dancing was, in his words, a pathological expression of desperation and pious fear. Their minds simply could not process the sheer horror of their reality anymore, so their bodies just took over. Now, let's jump forward to 1962. Those Tanganyika schoolgirls were in their own unique kind of pressure cooker. They were trapped between the rigid, strict discipline of a foreign-run boarding school and the massive, overwhelming expectations placed on them following their country's independence, which, by the way, had been won just 3 weeks prior. So they're facing immense societal pressure to succeed with absolutely no culturally acceptable outlets to express all that profound anxiety. The somatic valve releasing trapped trauma. And this brings us right to the core mechanism of why the body reacts this way. When the human mind is pushed far beyond its limits in a highly restrictive environment, it has to find a way to let off steam. It desperately needs an escape. That's the concept of the somatic valve. When there's no psychological escape available, the nervous system forces an involuntary physical reaction to discharge that pent-up trauma. The laughing triggers muscle weakness and releases endorphins. The dancing forces a dissociative trance. It's the body's ultimate desperate failsafe to relieve pressure when the mind is totally trapped. Conclusion: not a defect, but a defense. So bringing this all together, MPI completely changes how we should look at these bizarre historical events. Mass psychogenic illness isn't a sign of weakness, it's not madness, and it's certainly not a defect. It is actually a profound evolutionary capability of the human nervous system. It's a built-in survival mechanism designed to help us cope when psychological distress becomes completely intolerable. It is literally the body carrying the weight when the mind simply no longer can. Which leaves us with this final, fascinating thought for our explainer today. If our nervous systems are so deeply wired to physically mirror the suffering and stress of those around us through simple visual and social contact, what invisible stress contagions are we spreading to each other right now in our modern, highly connected world? Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll let you ponder that.